What are you complaining about? You used to push her around sometimes too. I just set some limits. She was my daughter. Those words tore through my soul like a rusty knife through years of poorly healed scars. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I'd tell anyone. And if, for just a second, you feel like this sounds familiar, I just ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It will help me keep unburdening myself. There he was, Samuel, standing in the doorway of my house in Astoria, Queens. As if the last 15 years were just a bad dream. He had the same smell of cheap beer mixed with drugstore cologne, the same murky gaze that used to make me tremble when Camilla was little. But he looked different now. A new gray sport coat, hair slicked back with gel, polished shoes, a wolf in sheep's clothing. It was a Tuesday afternoon, that time of day when the sun filters gold between the buildings, and I had just gotten back from the cemetery where Arthur's ashes are interred. Like every week, I had brought yellow chrysanthemums and sat on the marble bench, telling him about my day, about the problems with the boiler, about how much I missed the sound of his keys in the door when he came home from work. My hands still smelled of damp earth and petals when I heard the doorbell. Through the frosted glass of the front door, I made out a stocky, masculine silhouette. My heart started to beat faster, but I figured it was the Con Edison guy, or maybe Mr. Reynolds, the neighbor who was always coming over to borrow my hammer. I opened it without asking who it was. Mistake. There he was. Samuel Miller, the man who had turned my daughter's early years into a hell of screams, beatings, and humiliation. The same man I had thrown out of our lives when Camilla was only 8, after finding her hidden under the bed in the room we shared in a cramped apartment in the South Bronx, a bruise on her arm and her eyes swollen from crying. "Constance," he said with a smile that churned my stomach. "How have you been? You look older, as if time were a disease." I wanted to slam the door in his face, but my legs turned to jelly. It was like seeing a ghost, the kind that comes back to collect on debts you thought were settled for good. "What do you want, Samuel?" I managed to ask, clinging to the doorframe. He leaned against the wrought iron railing that Arthur had installed when we moved into this house. His fingers, the same ones that had hurt my little girl, now traced circles on the metal as if he owned it. "I heard your husband left you a nice little sum," he said bluntly, looking me straight in the eye. "And well, as Camilla's father, I think I have a right to an opinion on what's done with that money." A right. He said a right. After years of absence, after nights when Camilla would ask why her daddy had hit her, why he yelled so much, why Mommy cried when she thought no one was looking. After the therapy sessions I paid for with the little I earned cleaning offices in Midtown Manhattan, working double shifts to afford every appointment. Besides, he continued, as if we were old friends chatting about the weather, I think it's time for Camilla and me to rebuild the relationship we lost. She's an adult now. She can make her own decisions. My mouth went as dry as pavement in a heat wave. The words got stuck in my throat. "What money are you talking about?" I lied, because even though I knew exactly what he was referring to, I needed time to process what was happening. Samuel let out a dry laugh, like dead leaves clogging the gutters in Central Park during the fall. "Don't play dumb, Constance. The whole neighborhood is talking about the inheritance Arthur left you guys. A house, a commercial space, bank accounts. Word is it's around $200,000. The air grew thick, unbreathable. How had he found out? Who had told him about the will Arthur had so carefully drafted, naming Camilla and me as the sole beneficiaries of everything he had built with his hard-working hands? "Look," he went on, lighting a cigarette without asking my permission, "I'm not here to fight. I know you and I had our differences in the past." Differences? As if beating a 6-year-old girl until she had bruises on her ribs were differences. As if shoving me against the wall when I tried to defend her were differences. As if forcing us to flee in the middle of the night, carrying a sleeping Camilla and 2 bags of clothes, were differences. "But Camilla is my blood," he continued, letting the cigarette ash fall on the geraniums Arthur had planted with so much love. "And a father has rights. Rights that no judge can take away from me." That's when something inside me broke. Not my heart, because that word implies something clean, like glass shattering all at once. This was messier, more painful. as if all the emotional scars I had managed to heal over the years had been ripped open again, all at the same time. "Get out," I said in a whisper. "Excuse me?" I said, "Get out. Now." Samuel smiled again, but this time it was cruel. "You know what? I've already talked to Camilla. She knows I'm here. In fact, she's the one who gave me your address." The world swayed beneath my feet. "You're lying. Wanna bet?" He pulled out his cell phone, one of those new ones with a big screen, and showed me a text thread. I could clearly see the name. "Camilla, my princess." The messages were recent, from just a couple of hours ago. "Dad, it's about time you came back. Mom's at the house, 224 30th Avenue. The three of us need to talk." My knees gave out. I had to hold onto the doorframe to keep from falling. She doesn't know what she's doing," I murmured. "She's a 23-year-old woman, Constance. She's not the little girl you can manipulate with your stories anymore." My stories? Were the marks on her body stories? Were the nights I rocked her while she had nightmares stories? Were the years I worked my fingers to the bone to pay for her therapy stories? Samuel dropped the cigarette on the ground and crushed it with his shoe, staining the custom tiles Arthur had chosen himself. "See you soon, Constance." "Very soon." And he left, whistling a tune I didn't recognize, walking down the sidewalk like he owned the world. I closed the door, threw all 3 deadbolts Arthur had installed to make me feel safe, and collapsed onto the cold floor of the entryway. For the first time in 15 years, I felt that icy terror again, that feeling of being completely defenseless. 2 days later, my phone rang at 7 in the morning. It was Camilla. "Mom, why did you treat him like that? He's trying to reconnect." My daughter. My only daughter. The little girl I'd carried out of a Bronx apartment with our clothes in bodega bags because I couldn't even pack in peace. The same one I'd rocked for years when she woke up screaming from nightmares. Now she was speaking to me in the cold tone of a stranger. "Do you remember what he did to you, Camilla?" "Yes. But that was years ago, Mom. I want to heal. I can't live with so much resentment." Resentment? Was it resentment to protect your child from someone who hurt her? Was it resentment to remember every punch, every cry, every night she couldn't sleep because her own father had turned her into his punching bag? And your way of healing is to let the same man who broke your teeth when you were 7, who locked you in the bathroom for hours, who told me you were a useless burden, now manipulate you with smiles and come to claim what your stepfather left you out of love? Silence. On the other end of the line, just the sound of the city waking up, the rumble of the 7 train, the shouts of vendors on Roosevelt Avenue, the distant wail of an ambulance. "He says you were violent with me, too," she finally whispered. "That you made things up to separate us. That I was happy with him and you brainwashed me. That's when I died. Not a physical death. Something much worse. Because it's one thing to be betrayed by a stranger, and another thing entirely to be betrayed by the piece of your soul you've raised for 23 years. I hung up the phone without saying goodbye. I sat on the bed I had shared with Arthur for 12 years, looking at the photos he had taped to the wall on his side. They were all of Camilla, her middle school graduation, her first job at a stationery store in Jackson Heights, the day she turned 18, and Arthur bought her a big sheet cake from Martha's Country Bakery. In every photo, he was hugging her as if she were his own daughter, as if he had known her since she was born. Arthur never asked me for details about Samuel. He only said once, while we were watching a movie on TV, "The past is the past, my love. What matters is the future we're going to build together." And he kept his word. For 12 years, he was the father Camilla never had. He worked from 5 in the morning at his carpentry workshop in Long Island City, making custom furniture for middle-class families who wanted something nice but couldn't afford the stores in Manhattan. He'd come home with his hands covered in varnish and sawdust, smelling of fresh wood and glue, but always with a piece of candy in his pocket for Camilla. "How was school, princess?" He'd ask her every day while washing his hands in the kitchen sink. And he would sit and listen to her, really listen. Not like those fathers who pretend to pay attention while looking at their phones. Arthur looked her in the eyes, asked questions, took an interest in her math problems or the friends who were bothering her. When Camilla started high school, he enrolled in night classes to learn how to use a computer. "If my daughter is going to study computer science, I have to understand what she's talking about, he'd tell me as he wrestled with the mouse and keyboard as if they were personal enemies. And when she decided to study business instead of computer science, he didn't complain. He just said, "The important thing is that she's happy and has a better future than we did. The better future than we did." Arthur made a good living, but we weren't rich. We lived in a 2-bedroom house in Sunnyside that he bought as a fixer-upper and slowly improved. He rewired the electricity, polished the mosaic floors, and painted the walls bright colors because sad houses make for sad families. He put pots of geraniums in the yard and built a small deck where we had breakfast on Sundays, watching the planes fly towards LaGuardia. We didn't have a new car or vacations in Florida, but we had something I never had as a child: peace, quiet, the certainty that when we came home, no one would be screaming, no one would be drunk, no one would hurt anyone. Arthur watched every dollar he earned. He had an old ledger book where he wrote down all our expenses. Groceries, $200. Con Ed, $75. Camilla's school supplies, $110. And he always set aside an amount for savings. "It's for the girl's future," he'd say when I complained that he wouldn't buy himself new clothes or that we never went to the movies. "We'll have time to enjoy ourselves when Camilla is settled." That future never came for him. 2 years ago, he started coughing. At first, we thought it was from the workshop dust, from working so much with wood without proper protection, but the cough wouldn't go away. Then came the chest pains, the weight loss, the nights he'd wake up drenched in sweat. The doctor at Elmhurst Hospital sent us for tests, then more tests, then a biopsy, advanced stage lung cancer. "How long?" I asked the oncologist in his office, while Arthur got dressed behind the green curtain. "If he responds well to treatment, maybe 2 years. If not," the doctor took off his glasses and cleaned them with a handkerchief, avoiding my gaze, "maybe 6 months." It was 14 months. 14 months of chemotherapy that left him with no energy to walk to the kitchen. 14 months of watching him lose weight until he was a shadow of the strong man who used to carry furniture by himself. 14 months of feigning optimism when inside we knew our time was running out. But even sick, even weakened, Arthur kept thinking of us. One afternoon, while Camilla was at college, he took me to the lawyer's office, Mr. Gutierrez, on Queens Boulevard. "I want to get everything in order," he said as we slowly climbed the stairs, stopping on each step for him to catch his breath, "so you won't have any problems later." The will he signed that day named Camilla and me as the sole heirs to everything he had built: the house, the workshop, the savings accounts, and a life insurance policy he had been paying religiously for 10 years without my knowing. "It's nearly $200,000, the lawyer explained as he reviewed the documents. "Your husband was very forward-thinking, as if he had known he was going to leave so soon. On Arthur's last night in the hospital, when he could no longer speak but could still hear, I whispered in his ear, 'Rest easy, my love. I'm going to take care of Camilla. I promise.' He squeezed my hand with the little strength he had left. And now, 2 years later, that promise was shattering into pieces. Because Camilla, the girl Arthur worked himself sick for, saved every dollar for, stayed up late helping with homework he didn't understand, now believed the lies of the very man who had hurt her. That afternoon, when I finished crying, I made a decision. I took out the shoebox where I kept all the photos from when Camilla was little, photos Samuel had never seen because I took them after we threw him out. There she was at 9, with her front teeth crooked because Samuel had knocked them loose with a slap. There she was at 10, drawing pictures of families where there was only a mother and a daughter. There she was at 11, hugging Arthur the day she met him, with a smile she hadn't had in years. And at the bottom of the box, wrapped in an old cloth, I found what I was looking for: the phone I used when we lived in the Bronx. An old Nokia that couldn't make calls anymore, but that still held the audio recordings I had secretly made when Samuel would come home drunk and start yelling. Recordings where you could clearly hear his voice threatening to kill us both if I dared to report him. Recordings I had never had the courage to use, but that now perhaps were my only way to save my daughter from herself. 3 weeks passed without a word from Camilla. 3 weeks of silence that felt like centuries. I went through my routine like an automaton. Wake up at 6, make coffee for 1 instead of 2, check on the plants in the yard that Arthur had tended with such love, go to the market for groceries. But everything felt empty, like acting in a play where all the other actors had left the stage. The neighbors started to whisper. Mrs. Diaz, the woman from next door, stopped me one morning while she was watering her plants. Hey, Constance, isn't that Camila's father, the one who's been around asking about you? My blood ran cold. What do you mean? Well, he came by a few days ago, asking where you worked, what time you got home, if you lived alone. Like he was investigating, you know? He gave me a bad feeling, honestly. Samuel was gathering information, like a predator studying its prey before attacking. That afternoon, as I was organizing Arthur's papers at his desk, the doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw a white SUV parked outside. Camilla got out of the passenger seat. My heart leaped. Maybe she had come to her senses. Maybe she was coming to apologize, to tell me she realized the mistake she was making. But when I opened the door, she wasn't alone. Samuel was with her, wearing a smile that made my skin crawl. Hi, Mom, Camilla said without looking me in the eye. We came to talk to you. We, as if they were a couple, a unit, as if the last 15 years hadn't happened. Can we come in? Samuel asked, already pushing the door open before I could answer. They walked into my living room like invaders. Samuel sat in the armchair where Arthur used to watch the news, putting his feet up on the coffee table where I kept our wedding photos. Camilla remained standing, nervous, fidgeting with her phone. Look, Constance, Samuel began in that fake, smooth voice I remembered so well. I think we got off on the wrong foot. I'm not here to fight with you or take anything from you. I just want what's best for my daughter. His daughter? After 15 years of absence, now she was his daughter? The thing is, Camilla has told me about the inheritance, he continued, picking up one of the photos from the table and looking at it with contempt. And I'm concerned that an older person like you is handling so much money alone. Don't you think it would be better if someone younger helped you out? An older person, as if my 58 years were synonymous with senility. I manage my affairs perfectly well, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Really? Samuel smiled and pulled some papers from his jacket. Because I have a very interesting document here. He spread the papers on the coffee table. It was a lawsuit. A late paternity claim where Samuel was demanding rights over Camilla's assets because she was a minor when the guardianship was established. What is this? I asked, though the letters were blurry because my hands were shaking. It's my legal right as Camilla's biological father to oversee any inheritance she receives before the age of 25, he explained with the calm of someone who has studied every detail. Turns out your husband's will has a few legal loopholes. I looked at Camilla, searching for any sign that this was a joke, that she couldn't possibly agree with this. Tell her, Camilla, Samuel encouraged. Tell your mother what we decided. Camilla finally looked at me, but in her eyes, I saw something that broke my heart. Pity. Not love. Not respect. Pity. Mom, we think it would be better if I managed my part of the inheritance directly. You can keep the house, but the money and the commercial property. I'm an adult. I can make my own decisions. You decided this? I asked, feeling as if a noose were tightening around my neck. Yes, she lied, because it was obvious the words coming out of her mouth had been rehearsed. Besides, my dad is helping me see things more clearly. Her dad, not Samuel, not that man. Her dad. Camilla, do you remember why we left the Bronx at 3 a.m. when you were 8? I asked desperately. She looked down. She was very young. Samuel intervened immediately. Kids sometimes misinterpret things. We had problems like any couple, but I never what? I interrupted, feeling rage build in my chest like boiling lava. Never knocked her front teeth out with a slap? Never locked her in the bathroom for hours because she was crying? Never told me she was a useless burden who only wasted money? Constance, please. Samuel sighed as if I were a petulant child. I've already talked to Camilla about that. She understands that you exaggerated things because you were jealous of our relationship. Jealous of watching a man beat my daughter. What relationship? I exploded. You hit her. You terrified her. She had nightmares every single night. Mom, that's enough. Camilla cut me off with a voice I didn't recognize. I'm an adult now. I don't need you to protect me from things that happened 15 years ago. That's when I realized the extent of the damage. Samuel hadn't just come back for the money. He had come back to finish the job he started years ago, to destroy the relationship between my daughter and me. And he was succeeding. Look. Samuel stood up from the armchair and walked to the window, looking out at the yard where Arthur's plants were. I don't want this to get ugly. We can settle this civilly. He turned and looked at me with those eyes I remembered so perfectly. Cold. Calculating. You sign the papers to transfer the savings account and the deed to the commercial space to Camilla's name. She's of legal age. She can do what she wants with her money. You keep this little house and everyone's happy. Little house. As if the home Arthur had built for us was insignificant. And if I don't sign? Samuel smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a shark before it bites. Well, then we'll have to go the legal route. Sue for fraudulent administration of a minor's assets. Investigate whether you really used the inheritance for Camilla's benefit or your own. Those things take time, cost money and lawyers, and in the end, he shrugged. In the end, the old folks always lose. The old folks always lose. I looked at Camilla, searching her face for any trace of the little girl I had cared for, protected, loved for 23 years. The girl who hugged me when she was scared, who made me drawings on Mother's Day, who told me, "I love you, Mommy," before falling asleep. But that girl wasn't there anymore. In her place was a 23-year-old woman who looked at me as if I were the problem, as if I were the villain of the story. You have 1 week to decide, Samuel announced, heading for the door. 1 week to make this easy. Camilla followed him without a goodbye, without a look back, without an explanation. I watched them get into the white SUV and drive down the street, past the bakery where Arthur used to buy me pastries every Sunday, past the park where we had taken Camilla to play when she was little, past the life we had built together that was now crumbling like a sandcastle. That night, for the first time since Arthur died, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room, looking at the photos Samuel had moved, remembering every happy moment we had lived in that house. And then I remembered something Arthur had told me once, when Camilla was in high school and had started hanging out with friends we didn't like. Sometimes, my love, you have to let people make their own decisions, even if you know they're going to get hurt. Because if you don't let them decide, they'll never learn. And if they never learn, they'll never value what really matters. Maybe Arthur was right. Maybe it was time to let Camilla make her own decisions, even if it meant losing her forever. The next day, I decided not to sign anything, not out of stubbornness, not out of greed, but because something deep in my heart told me that Arthur hadn't worked himself sick just so a man who had hurt Camilla could get his hands on the fruits of his sacrifice. That decision unleashed a storm I never could have imagined. The first text came at 6 in the morning. It was from a number I didn't know. "Ma'am, this is Robert, Camilla's boyfriend. I'm sorry to get involved in family matters, but I don't think you're seeing things clearly. Camilla is very upset by your attitude. She just wants to reconnect with her dad and you're not letting her. I hope you'll reconsider your position." Boyfriend? Since when did Camilla have a boyfriend? And why did this boyfriend dare to have an opinion on matters that were none of his business? An hour later, another message arrived, this time from a number with a profile picture. A woman in her 30s I didn't recognize. "Good morning, Mrs. Miller. My name is Paula, Samuel's girlfriend. He's told me the whole situation, and I think what you're doing to Camilla is very unfair. A real mother should support her daughter's reconciliation with her father, not prevent it because of old grudges. I hope God enlightens you to make the right decision." Samuel's girlfriend? When had he gotten a girlfriend? And what had he told her about us? The messages kept coming all morning. Friends of Camilla's I didn't even know existed. Co-workers of Samuel's. Even people who claimed to know the situation through the grapevine. All with the same message. I was the bad guy. I was the one preventing a beautiful family reunion. I was the resentful one who couldn't let go of the past. At 2 in the afternoon, Camilla called me directly. "Mom, why are you telling strangers our problems? What are you talking about? Robert told me you were very rude to him when he texted you, and Paula also told me you responded horribly. I hadn't responded to any of those people. I didn't even know who they were. Camilla, I haven't spoken to any of them." Oh, really? Then why does Robert have screenshots of your replies where you tell him to mind his own business? I froze. Someone was replying to those messages, pretending to be me. Honey, someone is using my name. I would never. Enough, Mom. Enough with the lies. You know what? I'm done. If you don't want to sign the papers nicely, we'll do it the legal way. And she hung up. That afternoon, I went to the phone store on the corner and asked the young man there to help me check my phone. Sure enough, there were replies sent from my number to all those contacts, but I hadn't written them. Ma'am, it looks like someone cloned your WhatsApp, the kid explained as he looked at my phone. It's something hackers do. They can send messages from your number without you even realizing it. Samuel had cloned my phone. He had sent rude, aggressive replies to all those people to make me look like the villain. And worst of all, Camilla believed him. Not me. 2 days later, while I was at the grocery store buying tomatoes, I ran into Mrs. Esposito, an elderly woman I'd known for years. Oh, Constance, what's wrong? You look so worn out. Family problems, Mrs. Esposito. Ah, yes, I heard. That your daughter wants to go live with her father and you won't let her. Look, sweetheart, I raised 5 kids on my own, and I'll give you a piece of advice. Sometimes you have to know when to let go. I heard. Who had told her what? Who told you that? Well, your son-in-law, your daughter's boyfriend. He came by the butcher shop yesterday asking about you. Said you've been very depressed since your husband passed and that you're not thinking clearly sometimes. Son-in-law. Robert was not my son-in-law. I didn't even know him, but he was going around the neighborhood telling people I was mentally unstable. That same afternoon, while I was sweeping the patio, I heard voices from next door. Mrs. Diaz was talking to another neighbor. No, well, the whole thing is very strange. The other day, the girl's father came by asking if I'd seen Constance acting strangely, if I'd seen her talking to herself, if she was on medication for her nerves. And what did you say? Well, no, that I've always seen her as normal. But he says the family is worried because she's been very paranoid since she was widowed. That she thinks everyone is out to steal from her. Oh, the poor thing. And at that age, with the depression? Yeah, he says that's why they want the daughter to handle the money, so she doesn't do something foolish. I stood paralyzed behind the door. Samuel was building a narrative where I was a mentally unstable, paranoid widow, incapable of handling money, and people were believing him because he showed up well-dressed, in his new SUV, speaking like an educated person, while I was just a 58-year-old woman who lived alone and looked sad lately. On Friday of that week, I received a call that froze my blood. Mrs. Constance Miller? Yes, this is she. This is Mr. Martinez from the Martinez and Associates law firm. I'm calling because we've received a complaint for fraudulent administration of assets, and we want to give you the opportunity to come in and clarify the situation before we proceed legally. What complaint? Miss Camilla Miller and Mr. Samuel Miller have presented documents alleging that you have been improperly using funds from an inheritance that partially belongs to the young lady, and that you have also shown signs of mental deterioration that incapacitate you from managing said funds. Mental deterioration. Sir, that's false. I haven't used any money improperly. Ma'am, I understand your frustration, but we have witnesses who have reported erratic behavior on your part. Furthermore, we have screenshots of aggressive messages you sent to family and friends. The messages Samuel had sent using my number. Could you come in on Monday at 10 in the morning? That way we can resolve this in a civilized manner. I hung up, my hands trembling. Samuel didn't just want the money. He wanted to destroy me completely. He wanted the whole world to believe I was crazy, a thief, a bad mother. And he was succeeding. That night, as I was eating a fried egg and some refried beans, the doorbell rang. It was Frankie, Mrs. Diaz's grandson, a 10-year-old boy who always greeted me warmly. Mrs. Connie, my grandma says to ask if you need anything. She said she's seen you looking very lonely lately, the only genuine act of kindness I had received in weeks. Tell your grandma thank you so much, honey. I'm fine. Are you sure? Because my grandma says your daughter doesn't visit you anymore. That you must be very sad. That child's eyes broke my heart, because he saw what the adults couldn't, that I was just an old woman who was lonely and sad. I'm fine, Frankie, really. He smiled at me and ran back home, but I wasn't fine. For the first time in my life, I felt completely defeated. Samuel had constructed the perfect plan: isolate me socially, destroy my reputation, turn Camilla against me, and use the legal system to take everything Arthur had left. And worst of all, no one believed me, because he was a man with resources, with a well-rehearsed story, with prepared witnesses, and I was just a widow living on memories. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the bed looking at Arthur's photos and thinking about what he would have done in my situation. And then I remembered something he told me the day he signed the will. "Constance, if anyone ever tries to take what's yours, don't you let them, because this isn't just money. It's my way of taking care of you when I'm not here anymore." It wasn't just money. It was love turned into protection, and I wasn't going to let Samuel destroy it without a fight. On Monday, I arrived at Mr. Martinez's office with a plastic bag in my hand. Inside was the old Nokia with the recordings I had kept for 15 years like unexploded bombs. The office was on the 12th floor of a building on Park Avenue, with huge windows overlooking the entire city. Samuel was already there, sitting in a leather chair, dressed in a navy blue suit that probably cost more than 3 months of my mortgage. Next to him was Camilla, wearing a dress I'd never seen before, and high heels that made her look older, more serious. When I walked in, neither of them greeted me. Mr. Martinez was a man in his 40s, with a perfectly trimmed beard, and that slow, deliberate way of speaking that lawyers use when they want to intimidate you. "Mrs. Miller, have a seat. We are going to resolve this matter in the most civilized way possible." I sat across from them, feeling like I was on trial and had already been found guilty. "Right," the lawyer began, looking over some papers. "We have a complex situation here. On one hand, we have a will that names you and Miss Camilla as universal heirs. On the other hand, we have evidence that you have been making improper use of those funds." "What evidence?" I asked, though my voice sounded weaker than I would have liked. Samuel smiled and pulled a folder from his briefcase. "For starters," he said, sliding some papers across the desk, "here are the bank statements from the last 6 months. Constant withdrawals of significant amounts, unnecessary purchases, expenses that do not correspond to the basic needs of an elderly person." I looked at the papers, my heart pounding. There were, indeed, withdrawals I had never made, purchases from stores I had never been to, transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. "I didn't make any of these transactions," I said, feeling the air grow heavier. "Ma'am," the lawyer intervened condescendingly, "we understand that the loss of a loved one can affect one's judgment. No one is accusing you of malice, but it is clear you are not in a condition to manage such a significant amount of money. Furthermore," Samuel added, "we have testimony from neighbors who have noticed erratic behavior, conversations with non-existent people, episodes of aggression, constant forgetfulness, lies. It was all lies. But they were so well constructed, with documents that looked real, with witnesses he had probably bought or convinced. And to top it all off," Samuel continued, "there are the aggressive messages you've been sending to family and friends, threatening people who only want to help." He pulled out his phone and showed me screenshots of the messages he himself had sent using my number. Messages full of profanity and threats I would never have written. Camilla looked at me with a mixture of pity and shame, as if I were a stranger who had lost her mind. "For all these reasons," the lawyer concluded, "we believe the most prudent course of action would be for Miss Camilla to assume full administration of the inheritance, under the legal supervision of Mr. Miller as her biological father." That's when I took the Nokia out of my bag. "Before I sign anything," I said with a calm I didn't feel, "I'd like you to listen to something." Samuel frowned. Camilla sat up straighter in her chair. I turned on the old phone, found the audio files, and selected the first of many. Samuel's voice filled the office, clear and unmistakable. "I'm going to kill you, Constance. You and that useless brat. If you leave me, I will find you wherever you hide, and I will kill you both." The silence that followed was deafening. "There's more," I said, moving to the next file. "That kid is a burden. She eats too much, cries too much, costs too much. We should have given her up for adoption." Camilla turned pale. "And more," I continued, playing another audio clip. "Go ahead and report me. but I have connections everywhere. They'll send your daughter back to you bruised and beaten so you learn not to mess with me." Samuel had jumped out of his chair, his face red with rage. "Those recordings are illegal. They were made without my consent. It's also illegal to beat a 6-year-old girl," I countered, feeling a strength I didn't know I had. "It's also illegal to make death threats. It's also illegal to hack someone's phone to send fake messages." The lawyer nervously shuffled the papers. It was clear Samuel hadn't told him the whole truth. "Camilla," I said, looking my daughter straight in the eye, "do you remember when you were 7 and I took you to the dentist because you had 2 loose teeth?" She nodded slowly. "Do you remember what you told the doctor when he asked what happened?" Camilla's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't answer. "You told him that your daddy had hit you because you didn't like the soup he'd made. The doctor wanted to call social services, but I begged him not to because I was afraid they would separate us." Samuel tried to interrupt, but I kept talking. "Do you remember the night we left the Bronx? Do you remember telling me, 'Mommy, I don't want to live with him anymore because he scares me'?" Camilla broke down. She started to cry like she did when she was little, with those deep sobs that come from the soul. But he said you made all that up to keep him away from me. And when have I ever lied to you, my child? In 23 years, when have I ever lied to you?" The lawyer cleared his throat. "Well, this situation has become considerably more complicated. I believe we need to review all this documentation before proceeding." Samuel marched toward the door. "This isn't over, Constance. I'll get that 200,000 one way or another." "No," I said, standing up. "You won't get a thing, because for the first time in my life, I'm going to fight." After Samuel left, Camilla remained seated, crying silently. "Mom, I didn't know you had those recordings. I never wanted to use them. I hoped I'd never have to remember those things. But then, everything he told me was a lie?" I sat next to her and hugged her like I did when she was a little girl. "Honey, people who cause harm are very good at making others feel guilty for their own pain. Your father hurt you when you were little, and now he's hurting you again, but in a different way. Can you forgive me?" she asked through her sobs. "I have nothing to forgive. You just wanted a father who loved you. That's the most natural thing in the world." That afternoon, we went home together. Camilla was quiet the whole way, looking out the window as if seeing the city for the first time. When we arrived, she sat in the armchair where Arthur used to read the paper and said, "Mom, do you think Arthur would have forgiven me for all this?" "Arthur loved you as if you were his own blood," I answered, pouring her a glass of lemonade like I used to when she was sick. "He knew that sometimes people make mistakes when they're looking for something they're missing. What are we going to do now?" For the first time in weeks, I smiled. "Now, we're going to do what Arthur would have wanted. We're going to use this money to build something good. Not to get rich, but to help other families who are going through what we went through." Camilla looked at me curiously. "Like what?" "Like a shelter for women and children who need to escape from abusive homes. Like scholarships so kids like you could go to college without worrying about money. Like something that will make Arthur proud of us, wherever he is." That night, we had dinner together for the first time in months. We didn't talk much, but we didn't need to, because we had regained something worth more than any inheritance: the trust between a mother and a daughter, and Samuel could threaten and sue all he wanted. He was no longer fighting a scared, lonely woman. Now he was fighting a family. But Samuel wasn't going to give up that easily. 3 days after our meeting with the lawyer, just as Camilla and I were starting to plan how to use Arthur's inheritance for good, I received a call that made my blood run cold. "Mrs. Constance Miller?" "Yes, this is she. This is Patricia Sanchez from Child Protective Services. We've received a very serious report concerning child neglect and abuse." "I'm sorry, I don't understand." "We have a report that a minor residing at your address is being exposed to at-risk situations by a person with mental health issues." My world tilted. There were no minors living in my house, just Camilla and me. "Ma'am, I think there's been a mistake. No child lives in my home. According to our records, the minor Sebastian Morales, age 5, son of Miss Camilla Miller, resides at your address and is under your care." Sebastian, Camilla's son, my grandson, the boy who was born when Camilla was 18, the result of a short-lived relationship, the boy I had helped raise for the first few years of his life, but who for the past 2 years had been living with his father in Chicago because Camilla needed to work and study. Why was Samuel using my grandson in this? Ma'am, my grandson doesn't live with me. He lives with his father in Chicago. Mrs. Miller, we need to verify that information. We will be conducting a home inspection tomorrow at 10 a.m. If the minor is not present, we will have to investigate why false information was reported. I hung up, my hands trembling. Samuel had made up that my grandson lived with me to accuse me of child abuse and neglect. I told Camilla everything that evening. Mom, this has gotten out of control, she said, looking over some documents on her laptop. But I have an idea. The next day, when the social workers from CPS arrived, Camilla had everything prepared. Birth certificates, documents proving Sebastian lived with his father, time-stamped photos showing the boy hadn't been in New York City for months. We apologize for the trouble, Camilla told the officials with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. But we think we know who made this false report, and why. She told them the whole story. Samuel's manipulation, the threats, the attempt to take our inheritance, and now this. Do you have any proof of what you're telling us? Ms. Sanchez asked. Camilla took out her phone and showed them a text conversation she'd had with Samuel the night before. The messages clearly showed him asking about Sebastian, where he lived, if I ever watched him. And when Camilla said no, he had insisted, asking if it would be possible for the boy to stay with me for a few weeks. We believe that when my mother refused to sign the papers to give him the money, he decided to find another way to hurt her, Camilla explained. This report is just revenge. The social workers left with an apology and a promise to investigate who had made the false report. But Samuel wasn't finished. That same week, flyers started appearing all over the neighborhood. Beware! Elderly woman with mental health problems lives at 224 30th Avenue. Has threatened neighbors and family. If you see her behaving erratically, report to this number. The flyers had my photo, taken from my social media without permission, and a description that made me sound dangerous. Suffers from violent episodes and hallucinations. Her own family is concerned for her mental stability. Camilla and I spent all of Saturday morning tearing those flyers off lampposts, car windshields, and store windows. This is harassment, Camilla said, ripping another one from the bakery door. This is a crime. But the flyers weren't the worst part. The worst part was when I went to the supermarket where I'd shopped for years and the manager intercepted me at the entrance. Ma'am, excuse me, but we're going to need someone to accompany you while you shop. Why? We received a call that you sometimes get confused and take things without paying. It's for security, you understand? The humiliation was so immense I just stood there, paralyzed. All the other customers were staring at me as if I were a criminal. I always pay for everything, I stammered. Yes, don't worry. This is just to avoid any problems. I left without buying anything, feeling as if I'd been slapped in public. But the last straw came on Wednesday afternoon. I was watering the plants in the yard when I heard shouting in the street. I went out to see what was happening and found a young woman arguing with Mrs. Diaz. You have to do something. The woman was yelling at my neighbor. That crazy woman is threatening my son. What crazy woman? Mrs. Diaz asked, confused. The one in the house next door. She told my little boy she was going to hurt him if he didn't behave. Every head turned toward me. I have never spoken to your son, I said, approaching to defend myself. Yes, you did. Yesterday afternoon, when he was playing on the sidewalk, you came out and told him that naughty children deserve to be hit. That's a lie. I didn't leave my house at all yesterday afternoon. I was watching television. So my son is lying? More neighbors gathered around. Some had known me for years, but others were new to the neighborhood. She has been acting very strange lately, someone muttered. My sister-in-law lives nearby and says she's seen her talking to herself in the yard. Yeah, and that she forgets things sometimes, like she doesn't recognize people. It was happening again. Samuel had gotten someone to lie about me, and the neighbors were starting to believe I was a real threat. Ladies and gentlemen, Mrs. Diaz intervened with a firm voice. I have lived next door to Constance for 8 years. She has never hurt anyone. She has never done anything wrong. But she's changed so much since her husband died, another neighbor insisted. She looks so worn out, so sad. Sometimes sadness can make people go crazy. Besides, added the woman who started it all, her own daughter is worried about her. The girl's father came and asked us if we'd noticed anything strange. There was Samuel again, building his narrative, convincing people I was dangerous. That night, Camilla and I sat in the kitchen, planning our next move. Mom, this can't go on. He's systematically destroying your reputation. But what can we do? It's my word against his, and he has money to pay for false witnesses. Camilla looked at me with a determination I hadn't seen since she was a little girl set on getting her way. We're going to teach him a lesson he'll never forget. What do you mean? We're going to use his own weapons against him. But this time, we're the ones who will have the truth on our side. She pulled out her phone and started typing. What are you doing? I'm texting Samuel. I'm going to tell him that you've finally agreed to sign the papers, but you want to see him tomorrow to discuss the terms. Why? Because he's going to come here thinking he's won. And when he arrives, we're going to have a surprise waiting for him that will change everything. Camilla was right. It was time to stop defending ourselves and start attacking. But what we didn't know was that Samuel had a surprise of his own, one that would test everything we had rebuilt between us. Because the next day, when he arrived at our house, he wasn't alone. He was with the police. And he had an arrest warrant for me. Mrs. Constance Miller, the officer said, while Samuel smirked behind him like a cat that had just caught a mouse. You are under arrest for criminal threats, harassment, and disturbing the peace. Camilla went pale. Wait, officer. There's been a mistake. There's no mistake, Samuel interjected, pulling out his phone. I have recordings of the threats your mother made to me. I have witnesses to her aggressive behavior, and I have proof that she's been harassing families in the neighborhood. The police officer reviewed the warrant. It all looked legal, with official seals and signatures he couldn't question. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with me. Mom, no, Camilla whispered, grabbing my arm. It's okay, honey, I said, though I was falling apart inside. You call Mr. Gutierrez, the lawyer who helped us with Arthur's will. Tell him what's happening. As the officer cuffed me, Samuel sidled up to Camilla. Look, princess, I didn't want it to come to this. But your mother forced my hand. Now, if you sign the papers to transfer the inheritance, I can talk to my lawyer about dropping the charges. Camilla looked at him with a mixture of contempt and disgust I had never seen in her before. You know what? Do whatever you want to my mom, but you will never get a single penny from me. Samuel's smile vanished. You're going to regret this, Camilla. No, my daughter replied with a firmness that filled me with pride. You're the only one who's going to have regrets. They took me to the precinct in a patrol car, as if I were a common criminal. The neighbors came out to their windows to watch the spectacle, some looking surprised, others with that I knew something was wrong expression. In the holding cell, I shared the space with two other women, one who'd been arrested for selling goods without a permit, and another who had beaten her drunk husband. Neither of them understood why an old woman like me was there. What did you do, sweetie? The street vendor asked me, a tough-looking woman in her 30s with scars on her hands. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. That's what they all say, the other woman laughed. But none of us got here for being saints. I couldn't explain to them that I was there because I'd had the audacity to protect the money my dead husband had left for his stepdaughter and me. I couldn't tell them that I was paying the price for raising a battered little girl who grew up to be a woman brave enough to defend her mother. I spent 2 days in that holding cell before Camilla could get the money for bail. 2 days eating food that tasted like cardboard, sleeping on a mattress that smelled of sweat and desperation, using a toilet with no privacy where every basic need became a humiliation. 2 days thinking about Arthur, wondering if this was what he would have wanted, if leaving that inheritance was worth it, if it was going to cause us so much suffering. When Camilla finally came to get me, she had Mr. Gutierrez with her and a folder full of documents. Mom, we found something, she said as we walked to the parking lot. Something that's going to change everything. In the car, the lawyer explained what they had discovered. Mrs. Miller, we did some digging into Samuel Miller. Turns out he has a criminal record for domestic violence in other states. Assault charges against 3 different women in the last 10 years. How did you get that information? Camilla hired a private investigator, the lawyer explained. And that's not all. We also found that the recordings he presented as evidence of your threats were edited. He used fragments of phone conversations you two had and manipulated them to sound like threats. Camilla took my hand. Mom, we also found out where he's getting the money for all this. For the lawyers, to pay off false witnesses, for the new SUV. Where? He has a girlfriend, Paula Mendoza, a 35-year-old woman who inherited a family business from her father who died 6 months ago. He convinced her to help him get his daughter back and the rights he was owed as a father. It all started to make sense. Samuel wasn't just manipulating me. He had found another victim, another vulnerable woman who had lost her father, and he was using her to finance his revenge. But there's more, the lawyer continued. Miss Camilla asked me to review her stepfather's will one more time, very carefully. He pulled some papers from his briefcase. Arthur didn't just leave a primary will. He left what we call a contingency will, stored in a safe deposit box at another law firm. What does that mean? It means he anticipated this exact situation, that someone might try to manipulate or coerce the beneficiaries to get the inheritance. In the second will, it specifically states that if any person outside the nuclear family attempts to claim rights to the assets, or if any type of harassment or manipulation occurs, the entire inheritance automatically transfers to a foundation he established. Camila smiled for the first time in weeks. A foundation to help women and children who are victims of domestic violence. Arthur. My dear Arthur. He had been protecting us even after his death. And what happens to Samuel? Well, the lawyer said with a shark-like grin, with the evidence we have of his criminal record, the manipulated recordings, and Camilla's testimony about the threats, we are going to file a lawsuit against him for extortion, harassment, tampering with evidence, and psychological abuse. Also, Camilla added, I already spoke to Paula, his girlfriend. When I showed her the real recordings of how he used to treat you and told her about his history of violence, she was in shock. Turns out he's been manipulating her too. How? He told her that her father had left her too much money for her to handle alone, that she needed a man to help her make smart decisions. He made her believe it was for her own good. It was the same pattern, the same manipulation, convincing vulnerable women they were incapable of managing their own lives. Paula is going to testify on our behalf, Camilla continued. She says Samuel confessed to her that he planned to take our money to teach you a lesson for separating him from me when I was a child. The next day, we all went to the precinct together. Camilla, Mr. Gutierrez, Paula, and me. Paula was a thin woman, with sad eyes and the nervous way of speaking that people who have been manipulated for a long time often have. Mrs. Miller, she said to me as we waited in the reception area. I didn't know about any of the things he did. He told me you were a bitter woman who made up stories to keep them apart, that he just wanted to get his daughter back. You don't have to apologize to me, I replied. He's very good at convincing people that the victims are the ones to blame. How did you know I existed? My daughter hired an investigator, I explained. But the important thing is that you realized who he really is in time. Paula nodded, unconsciously touching her left arm. Did he hurt you? I asked gently. She pulled up her sleeve and showed me a yellowish bruise. It was the first time. When I told him I wasn't sure about lending him any more money, he grabbed my arm really hard. Then he apologized, said he was just stressed out from the legal situation. The first time. There's always a first time. And then comes the second, and the third, until you can't even count how many times you've been hurt. Where is he now? Camilla asked. At a hotel near the airport. He said if things get ugly, he's going back to Tijuana where he has connections. Connections. Probably other women he'd manipulated, other schemes to get easy money. When the district attorney reviewed all the evidence we had gathered, the situation changed completely. Mrs. Miller, the DA told me, we are dropping all charges against you. Furthermore, we are issuing an arrest warrant for Mr. Miller for aggravated extortion and psychological abuse. But when they went to look for him at the hotel, Samuel was already gone. He had fled like the rat that he was, leaving behind Paula, the threats, and his plans to steal Arthur's legacy. That night, Camilla and I returned home together, the house where Arthur had given us a family, where we had been happy before the past came back to haunt us. Do you think he'll come back? Camilla asked as she made chamomile tea. I don't know, I answered honestly, but I don't care anymore. Why? Because I learned something very important these last few months. What? That you can't live your life in fear of ghosts from the past. And that sometimes the people you love the most are the ones you have to set free to make their own decisions. Camilla hugged me like she did when she was little. I love you, Mom. And I'm so sorry I failed you. You didn't fail me. You just needed to find your own way to realize what truly matters. That was the last time we ever spoke of Samuel Miller, because we finally understood that some people don't even deserve the space they occupy in our memories. 6 months later, I'm sitting in the garden of the house Arthur built for us, watching the flowers grow where his carpentry tools used to be. Life has changed in ways I never imagined. First, we fulfilled the promise I didn't even know I had made to Arthur. The foundation he established in his contingency will become a reality. Arthur's house is now a shelter for women and children who need to escape violent homes. It's not big. We can only house 6 families at a time, but it's enough to change lives. The first woman who arrived was named Elena. She was 26 with 2 small children. Her husband had beaten her so badly she had 3 broken ribs and couldn't lift her right arm. I have nowhere to go, she told me through tears the day she arrived. My family says it's my fault, that I must be doing something to make him so angry. Those words broke my heart because I remembered the Constance from 15 years ago, running in the middle of the night with Camilla in her arms, not knowing if we'd have a place to sleep the next day. You can stay here as long as you need to, I told her, showing her the room we had prepared with furniture Arthur had made years ago. And no one here will judge you for the decisions you made to survive? Elena stayed for 4 months. Her children started to laugh again. She found a job at a pharmacy and rented a small but safe apartment in Forest Hills. The day she left, she hugged me tightly. Mrs. Miller, you saved my life. No, I replied. You saved yourself. I just gave you a place to rest while you found your strength. After Elena came others. Mary, who had fled from Mississippi with her 3 daughters after her mother-in-law threw her out for not giving her son any grandsons. Carmen, a 50-year-old woman whose husband had controlled her financially for 30 years and who didn't even know how to use an ATM. Each story was different, but they all had something in common. Women who had lost faith in themselves and needed a safe place to remember who they were before someone else told them who they had to be. Camilla decided to study social work. She enrolled in night classes while working part-time at a city agency. On weekends, she comes to Arthur's house to help with activities for the children. You know what I love most about this? She told me one Saturday while playing with one of our residents' kids. What? That these children are going to grow up knowing there are adults who will protect them. They won't have to go through what I went through, feeling responsible for the violence I received. My daughter had found her purpose. She was no longer the scared little girl desperately seeking the love of a father who didn't know how to love. She was a strong woman who used her past pain to heal the pain of others. Paula changed her life too. After testifying against Samuel, she decided to sell the business she had inherited and use the money to study psychology. I want to understand how manipulation works, she explained to me one day over coffee in the kitchen at Arthur's house, so I can help other women recognize the signs before it's too late. She had cut her hair, started exercising, and had regained the light in her eyes that Samuel had been slowly extinguishing. You know what's the weirdest thing? She said one afternoon while helping to organize clothing donations. What? That when I was with him, I felt like I was going crazy, like I couldn't trust my own memory, my own feelings. Now I realize that was part of his plan. Gaslighting, Camilla called it, after reading some books on psychological abuse. Making the victim doubt their own reality until they are completely dependent on the abuser to define what is true and what is false. Have you heard anything from him? I asked her. No, and I hope it stays that way, she answered firmly. But if he ever comes back, I'm not the same woman he left. That scared, confused woman doesn't exist anymore. I only heard news of Samuel once. Mr. Gutierrez called to tell me he had been arrested in Tijuana for domestic violence against another woman. Apparently, he had tried the same scheme, convince a wealthy widow that he could help her manage her finances. Are they going to extradite him? I asked. Probably not, he replied. The case in Tijuana is more recent and has direct victims. But if he ever gets out and tries to return to New York, the arrest warrant we have for him will still be active. I didn't feel satisfaction knowing he was in prison, only relief. Relief that he wasn't hurting my family, and a pang of sorrow for the woman who had become his new victim, because that's what violence does. It creates a chain of pain that only breaks when someone decides enough is enough. The neighbors changed their attitude toward me, too. When word got around about what had really happened, many of them came to apologize. Mrs. Diaz was the first. "Constance, forgive me for ever doubting you. That man was very convincing." "There's nothing to forgive," I said, pouring her a glass of cold water. "He was good at manipulating. He'd been practicing for years. How did you know not to believe him?" "I didn't, at first," I admitted. There were moments when I even doubted my own memory, whether I had exaggerated things, whether it had really been as bad as I remembered. And what helped you trust yourself again? The recordings I had saved, and realizing that a mother doesn't forget her child's cry. She doesn't forget the look of terror. She doesn't confuse love with fear. Now, when I walk through the neighborhood, people greet me with genuine respect. Not pity, not condescension, respect. Because they know I'm a woman who fought for what was hers and won. My daily routine has completely changed. I wake up at 6 in the morning, not because I have to work to survive, but because I have a purpose I'm excited to fulfill. I have breakfast in the kitchen where Arthur used to read the paper, but now the table is covered with reports about the women we're helping, plans to expand the shelter, and thank you notes that I keep like treasures. At 8, I arrive at Arthur's house. I check that all the families are okay, talk to the women about their plans for the day, and help the kids get ready for school. At 10, I have my weekly appointment with the psychologist we hired for the shelter. Not just for the residents, but for me too, because I've discovered that healing others requires you to be healing as well. "How do you feel when you help these women?" Dr. Evans asked me in one of our sessions. "Like I finally understand what all the pain I went through was for," I answered. As if every blow I took, every humiliation, every night of fear, were lessons I needed to learn so I could teach others how to get out of where I was. "Do you still feel anger toward Samuel?" I thought about it before answering. "No, I don't feel anger anymore. I feel sadness for him, because he's a man who only knows how to hurt, and I feel gratitude." "Gratitude?" "Yes, because his return forced me to fight in a way I had never fought before. It forced me to value myself, to defend myself, to not let anyone else define my worth. In the afternoons, I go home to make dinner. But now I cook for 2 again, because Camilla decided to move back in with me. "It's not because I can't live alone," she clarified the day she brought her things over. "It's because I like living with you. I like our dinner conversations. I like taking care of Arthur's plants together. I like that we're a team. A team. That's what we were now. Not a mother rescuing a daughter. Not a daughter taking care of an elderly mother. A team of 2 adult women who chose to build a life together. On Sunday mornings, we go to the cemetery together where Arthur's ashes are. We tell him about Arthur's house, about the women we're helping, about our plans for the future. "Do you think he'd be proud?" Camilla asked one Sunday as she arranged fresh flowers on his marker. "I think he always knew this is what we would do," I replied. "That's why he prepared that second will, because he knew our hearts better than we knew them ourselves." Last night, while we were eating chicken tacos I made with a recipe I learned from one of our residents, Camilla asked me a question that surprised me. "Mom, do you ever regret marrying Arthur so young? Not having more adventures, more romances?" "Why do you ask?" "Because now that you're 59, you could meet someone else. You could fall in love again." I thought about it as I chewed slowly, savoring not just the food but the question. You know what? I don't regret a thing. Arthur gave me 12 of the happiest years of my life. He taught me that true love isn't possession, it's freedom. It's not control, it's support. But aren't you curious about meeting someone else? Maybe someday. But right now, I'm in love with my life, with getting up every morning knowing I'm going to do something that matters, with going to bed every night knowing I'm useful, that I'm strong, that I'm enough on my own, in love with my life. I never thought I'd say those words at my age, but it's the purest truth I've ever spoken. Today is Friday. In a few hours, Elena is coming to visit with her kids. Camila has activities planned for them, and I've made their favorite dessert. Tomorrow, a new woman is coming to the shelter. Her name is Rosa. She's 42, and she's been married for 20 years to a man who hits her every time he drinks. I'm going to tell her the same thing I tell all of them. You are safe here. Here, you can cry without anyone telling you you're exaggerating. Here, you can heal at your own pace. And when you're ready, here you can learn that you are so much stronger than they made you believe. Because that's what I learned. That sometimes life breaks you down completely so you can rebuild yourself in a more beautiful way. And that the most important love you can ever find is the love for yourself. The love that no one can take from you, manipulate, or destroy. The love that lets you say no without guilt and yes without fear. The love that turns pain into wisdom and wisdom into service. If you are listening to this story and you feel something resonate inside you, if you recognize your family, your partner, or yourself in any part of what I've told, I want you to know something. It is not your fault, and it is not too late. It is never too late to reclaim your life, your dignity, your voice. It is never too late to turn your story of pain into a story of liberation. Have you lived through something similar? Do you know someone who has? Let me know in the comments. Because sharing our stories is what makes us feel less alone in this world. And if this story touched your heart, please leave a like and subscribe so this message can reach someone else who needs to hear it. Because we all deserve a second chance. We all deserve to find our own Arthur's house. We all deserve to be in love with our own lives.